established Rich coming right back at you. This is one of those stories where it's important to slow down and be intentional about how I talk about it. First, I want to acknowledge Celeste Rivas Hernandez and send condolences to her family. 14 years old, and that alone should frame how important this conversation is. Now let's talk about what we know without rushing to a conclusion. David Burke, known as David, has now been formally charged, and the details being presented are extremely serious. The primary charge is first-degree murder with special circumstances. And that language matters because it tells you how the prosecution is approaching this case. They're not presenting this as something that happened in the moment. They're presenting this as something that was deliberate and calculated. One of the elements being alleged is what's called lying in wait, which in simple terms means they believe there was planning and a moment that was intentionally used. Another element is financial gain. And what they're saying is this was done to protect David's career, which introduces a very different type of motive. Then there's the claim that the victim was a potential witness, and that allegation connects this case to a separate line of investigation involving an alleged relationship with a minor. Now just take a minute and process that without trying to form an opinion yet, because if that is what the prosecution is able to prove, then this case takes on a very different weight. In addition to that, there are other charges being brought, including lewd and lascivious acts with a minor, and a charge related to the handling of her remains. And again, these are not small add-ons. These are charges that add to the overall picture the prosecution is trying to paint. But this is where the discipline comes in, because as serious as all of this sounds, these are still just allegations. And that distinction matters more than any headline you're gonna see.
Today, I am announcing the charges against David Anthony Burke, the musician known as David, spelled D4VD, in connection with the brutal and horrific murder of Celeste, a 14-year-old at that time. These charges include the most serious charges that a DA's office can bring. That is first-degree murder with special circumstances. The special circumstances being lying in wait, committing this crime for financial gain, or murdering a witness in an investigation. These special circumstances carry with it, along with the first-degree murder charge, a maximum sentence of life without the possibility of parole or the death penalty. The determination on whether or not the district attorney's office will seek the death penalty will be made at a later time. And there are additional charges against Mr. Burke, including continuous sexual acts, lewd and lascivious sexual acts with an individual under 14 years old, and mutilating a human remains of a body. Before I get into the description of these charges, so what you have as well with these charges is that, again, there are three sets of charges that have been brought. The first-degree murder with special circumstances, and again, those special circumstances are lying in wait. That Celeste went to Mr. Burke's home on the night of April 23rd, 2025, as alleged in the complaint, at his invitation, and again, was not heard from again. The second is a special circumstance being that this murder was committed for financial gain. As the evidence will show in court, the financial gain was for Mr. Burke to maintain his very lucrative musical career that Celeste was threatening on that particular night. The third charge, in addition to lying in wait and for financial gain, is murdering a witness to an investigation. In this particular case, as the evidence will come out in court, the witness to the investigation was Celeste, and the investigation was into the lewd and lascivious sexual acts committed by Mr. Burke that is the subject of count 2 of this complaint with Celeste while she was under 14 years old.
Now, after watching it, you can start to see how this case is being framed publicly. But there are details that require a little more context to fully understand what we're looking at. One of the most important details is how the victim was discovered. Her remains were found 4 months later inside an impounded Tesla that was linked to the suspect. And that time gap is not a small detail. That changes the entire nature of the investigation. Because now, investigators ain't working with a fresh scene. They are reconstructing events after time has already passed. That means the forensic evidence has limitations. And it also means digital evidence becomes more important. So you start looking at things like phone records. You start looking at location data and timelines. You start trying to piece together movements and communications. And you do all of that to build a sequence that makes sense in court.
We had to be certain that nothing we did or said would ever jeopardize this case. Ms. Rivas was a reported runaway from Riverside County. During the course of our investigation, detectives learned that she had been involved in a sexual relationship with Mr. Burke when she was a minor and he was an adult. Our investigators faced an extraordinary, difficult, and complex case. The condition of her remains delayed the medical examiner's ability to be able to determine cause of death. They recovered and analyzed a substantial amount of digital and forensic evidence. They stayed focused, disciplined, and committed to uncovering the truth. Their work, in close collaboration with the District Attorney's Office, has brought us to this moment today.
Now, after seeing the full news report, you can understand why this case is so complex. Not just because of who is involved, but because of what has to be proven. And that brings us to the legal reality of what things stand right now. When someone is charged like this, it don't mean the case is finished. It means the process is just entering a new phase. The prosecution now has the responsibility to present evidence, and the defense has the responsibility to challenge that evidence. And we all know that process takes time. It's not something that gets resolved in a week or even a month. So what you're going to see from this point forward is motions, hearings, and possibly new information coming out. And every piece of detail will add to how this case is understood. Now let's talk about what's at stake if these charges are proven. We're talking about life without the possibility of parole and maybe the death penalty. And that's why cases like this are handled with such precision in court, because the consequences are permanent. But again, that outcome has not been decided yet. That depends entirely on what can be proven and what can be defended against. And this is where I think people have to be careful. It's easy to hear something like this and immediately form an opinion. But the reality is, the full story hasn't been presented yet. That don't mean we ignore the seriousness of it. It just means don't jump to conclusions before the process plays out. Because once you decide something too early, it gets hard to adjust once new information comes out. And that brings me back to the most important part of this whole conversation. A young girl lost her life, and her family is living with that reality every single day. This is not entertainment. This is a situation that deserves respect, and it deserves patience. So as this case continues to develop, I'm going to keep following it with the same approach, focused on facts and not assumptions. And when more information becomes available, we'll add to the conversation with clarity, not gossip. Because in situations like this, how you respond matters just as much as what you say. But hey, that's just my opinion. What's yours? Like, comment, subscribe. Establish Rich. I'll be back with another one. Peace.